All right. Welcome into This is Baseball. I'm Brandon Johnson. So, we're at my favorite part of the regular season now. We are post-trade deadline, which means that all of the teams that are hoping to make the playoffs have made the moves that they need to make in order to feel like they are now the best version of themselves in 2024. So you have a lot of different teams moving players in order to shore up their bullpen, shore up their lineup, their defense, whatever holes that they felt their team had. They have made the moves that they feel will make them better and give them that push that they needed to either solidify their spot as a playoff team or maybe give themselves the pieces that they needed to go from a team that's kind of on the bubble to actually in it. And what I want to do in this episode is I don't want to go through all of the trades that were made. There's plenty of podcasts that have done that. What I want to do right now, and it's something that I did last season and had a lot of fun with it, is I want to do some schedule watching because we have about 60 games left, and that's an important 60 games for every team that's vying for a playoff position. Now, obviously, we have known what each team's schedule is for, the entire season. We knew the 162 games that each team was going to be played and who they were against. What we don't know at the beginning of the season is how important games in August and September are going to be when we're looking at a schedule in March and April. So what I want to do is I want to look at some upcoming matchups and schedules for all of the teams that are in a playoff position. And let me just kind of run through the teams that I personally feel are either in it or close to in it. Now, obviously, there are only 6 spots in each league. There's 3 division winners and 3 wild card winners. So I just want to go through a list of those teams real quick, and then we'll kind of go into depth on some schedules and some head-to-heads that I think will be very important. And we'll look at some situations where maybe one of these top teams are vulnerable, or look at some spots where a team that really needs to win some games could have an edge on their opponents. So let's go through the American League teams that I feel like are in it right now. So in the American League East, the Orioles and Yankees are within a half a game of each other. Baltimore's in first place in the East. And Boston's 7 games back in the American League East, but they are firmly in the wild card race. In the American League Central, Guardians are in first place. They're 6.5 games ahead of the Twins and the Royals, both tied for second and both current wild card teams. And then American League West, the Mariners and Astros are right there with each other. The Mariners are 1 game over the Astros. So obviously only 6 teams can make it in each league. So I listed 8, so not everybody here is going to make it. So let's jump into some schedules. So let's look at Baltimore. And we're going to look really just at August. We'll look at September at a little bit of a later date. But for Baltimore coming up, they have 4 against the Guardians this weekend. And then lightens up against the Blue Jays and Tampa, who both are not in it. And then they play the Nationals as well. But then they have 4 against the Red Sox. And that's obviously important for Baltimore because you don't want to have a bad series against a division team. Now, Boston is 7 games back, so it wouldn't climb back in the standings if Boston swept, but it definitely would make you a little nervous if you're the Baltimore Orioles. So, but then they play 4 against the Astros and 3 against the Dodgers. So a little bit of a a tough month with some really solid teams. And then looking at the Yankees schedule for August, they actually have a pretty light schedule. So they have the Blue Jays, Angels, Rangers, White Sox. Everybody's beating the White Sox right now. I think they've lost like 16 straight. They have the Tigers, who just sold. They do have 3 against the Guardians towards the end of the month. But then the Rockies and Nationals, and then close the month on against the Cardinals. So really, if you're the Yankees, you could not ask for a better or more appealing schedule in August. This should be a really good month for the Yankees, and it could be an opportunity for them to not only catch Baltimore but possibly gain some separation, because their schedule is pretty favorable in comparison to Baltimore's. Now let's take a peek at what Boston has coming up in August. They actually will have 9 against the Astros, both home and away series. I already mentioned the 4-game set against Baltimore. They have 3 in Kansas City as well. Kansas City's playing really good baseball this season and is ahead of ahead of Boston. So some tough matchups. But when I'm looking at the American League East and their schedules, I think the Yankees have a really big opportunity here to jump into the first place spot in the American League East. But let's hop down to the Central. Cleveland's on top in that division. Like I said, they're 6.5 above the Twins and Royals. So let's kind of see what's going on there for the month of August. So like I mentioned earlier, Baltimore and Cleveland are going to open August with a 4-game set against each other. This will be in Cleveland. And I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself here, but a potential look at maybe an American League Championship Series, between those two teams, a little preview there. But 4 against the Royals and 4 against the Twins this month for Cleveland. So they're going to want to make sure that they win those games, obviously, because while both the Twins and Royals are 6.5 back, I still feel like they have an opportunity to get back into that division. I might be just a little ambitious there, but the Cleveland Guardians play Milwaukee Brewers and they play the Yankees as well. So not really an easy August for them. So I look at the schedule and maybe see Cleveland potentially faltering a little bit here. And looking at the Twins, they don't really have an easy time. They get to open against the White Sox, and like I said, everybody is just beating up on the White Sox, as they should. They're not having a good season. They'll play the Cubs too, which Cubs folded. But then they have that 4 against Cleveland, 3 against Kansas City. And they'll play San Diego as well, who is firmly in the National League wild card. St. Louis as well as a wild card team, then the Atlanta Braves. So a lot of tough series coming up for Minnesota. And the Royals aren't going to have it any easier in August. They'll get Detroit 4 times, and they play Boston, 2 against St. Louis, which is on a weekend, which they did this last year where the Royals just played 2 against St. Louis and then had a random Sunday off. I wish that they would schedule that differently so the Royals and Cardinals aren't off on a Sunday. But anyway, then they play the Twins, which head-to-head against teams that are playing for wild card and potentially trying to get back into that division. That series, or really all these series, are going to be must-see TV down the stretch. But they'll play the Phillies as well. And in my opinion, the Phillies are the best team in all of baseball. Then, like I said, they have 4 against the Guardians and then 3 against the Astros. So really not necessarily a cakewalk for anybody in the Central, but I will be interested to see what happens, particularly looking at the Royals bullpen. They improved at the trade deadline drastically. So I'm curious if they can win some of these games that they otherwise haven't been winning due to their bullpen not being able to hold leads, and winning games and series against these good teams. Now, let's move on to the American League West and start with the Mariners because they're leading that division right now. So the Mariners have, honestly, they play the Phillies. And then really after that, they play the Dodgers in that second to last week of September, but a lot of winnable games here. So after the Phillies, they play Detroit, then the Mets, and the Mets are in the wild card race, so give them a little bit of respect. But again with Detroit, San Francisco, who were sellers, and then Tampa, sellers, and then they get the Angels at the end of the month. So really, if you're the Mariners, you're probably looking forward to August. Now, Houston, the inevitable Astros, they got a little bit of a tough August, particularly in the back half of the month. Now, they'll play Boston 6 times. They do get to play the White Sox, but they got to play the Orioles 4 times, then the Phillies, and then the Royals. So a lot of head-to-head matchups between these teams that are trying to get into the playoffs. So really, August is going to be a good month of baseball in the American League. So if you're looking at the National League, this race is pretty fun. So Philadelphia leads the East, the Dodgers lead the West, the Brewers lead the Central, and then you have Atlanta, New York, and San Diego that are your 3 current wildcard teams. Arizona's a half game back. Pittsburgh is a game and a half out. St. Louis is a game and a half out as well. So pretty tight race in the National League for the wild card. But let's run through some schedules in August. So let's start with the Phillies out of the National League East. So they play the Mariners and Dodgers and Diamondbacks. And then get a little bit of a break in the middle of the month versus the Marlins and Nationals. Then they got to play the Braves, obviously in the same division, have a lot of history. Kansas City, and then against Houston, and then they end the month against the Braves again. So, not a easy month for the Phillies, but I again said it earlier that the Phillies, I think, are the best team in the league, so I'm not really concerned about anything when I look at that. But let's look at the Braves. They get 4 against the Marlins, and then the Brewers. Then they play Rockies and Giants, Angels. Like I said, they play the Phillies 6 times. We just talked about that. And they play the Nationals and Twins. So if there was ever a time for the Braves to maybe try to make a push, August would be the month because, like I said, the Phillies have a tough schedule. I'm not really worried about it, but that's a pretty easy schedule for the Atlanta Braves, in my opinion. They're 7.5 games back from the Phillies. Now, based on recent history, if you're the Atlanta Braves, I don't know if you really want to catch the Phillies. I think you might be potentially trying to be a wild card team, so you don't have that break. You don't get that first round bye. Maybe you want the wild card this time around. Wouldn't that be funny if the Braves were a wild card team and ended up playing the Phillies and then beat the Phillies? Because that's obviously what the Phillies did to the Braves last 2 seasons. But moving on to the Mets, who, again, are a wild card team currently. Looking at their August, they have the Angels. They have a random makeup game with the Cardinals in there. Rockies, Mariners, A's, Marlins, Orioles, 4 against the Padres, and then Diamondbacks. So if you're the Mets, you probably feel pretty good that you're going to just go with the flow and continue to stick in that wild card spot. And I think if you're the Mets, you've got to be really happy because I don't think that they really intended on being competitive this season. But here they are going into August, sitting firmly in a wild card spot. Let's move over to the NL Central with the Brewers on top in that division. They, in August, they've got really 4 series that are going to be kind of interesting for them because they do see the Braves and the Dodgers. Then they have the Guardians and Cardinals. But they get the Nationals and A's as well. So, take care of business against those 2 teams, win 5 out of 6 games there, and then just kind of tread water, go 500 with those other games against the Braves and Dodgers and Guardians, and you'll be in good shape. Well, let's look at what the Cardinals have going on in August here. So, Cubs and Cardinals is always fun. That Friday day game in Wrigley. But let's look at some key series here. So, they have that 2-game set against the Cardinals or against the Royals that is weird on a weekend. Do have the Dodgers and Brewers, Twins and Padres, and then Yankees. So I don't know about that one for the Cardinals, but we'll see. And the Cardinals are currently 1.5 games out, so they got a lot of pressure on them to really perform well there. But I didn't want to overlook the Pirates when I was looking at these schedules because I think obviously with everything that Paul Skeens has done where he's clearly going to be Rookie of the Year, he started the All-Star game, like he should get votes for Cy Young and maybe potentially win Cy Young. We have 2 months left in the season, so it's not crazy to say that he couldn't do that. But the Pirates are 6 games back in the division, but they're 1.5 games back in the wild card. So let's see what they have going on. So it's not going to be an easy, particularly in the first half. So you have the Diamondbacks first. Obviously, I think that they can go toe to toe with the Diamondbacks. I know the Diamondbacks went to the World Series last year, but they're kind of on a similar trajectory last year where they were really the last team in. Padres as well, and these are matchups. These are 6 straight matchups that they really need to win. Because if they can do that, then there's a huge potential that by the time that they meet the Dodgers on August 9th, they could be a wild card team. And then perform well against the Dodgers, you got to play the Padres again. So they have a really good opportunity here to have these head-to-head matchups and gain some ground. They'll play the Mariners, and then at the end of the month, they play the Guardians. And then in between, they have the Rangers and Reds and Cubs. So between the head-to-head matchups and then the back half of that month with some teams that aren't really in it anymore, are the Pirates gonna be that surprise team this year that makes the playoffs? I'm starting to believe in the Pirates a little bit here, and I think you should too. But let's go see what's going on with the National League West. So, obviously, you have the division-leading Dodgers. They are in first place, and they have a 6.5 game lead on the Padres, 7 on the Diamondbacks. So, let's see what they have going on. So, they'll play the A's, and they have the Phillies. And Phillies and Dodgers is a potential NLCS matchup. And they have the Pirates. We already talked about that. 4 against the Brewers, Cardinals, Mariners, Orioles. Pretty stacked schedule. They'll close the month against the Diamondbacks. Pretty stacked schedule, like I said. But again, similar to the Phillies, the Dodgers are just a star-studded lineup, and they only got better at the deadline. So I don't know if it really matters who they play in the regular season. I think they have the National League West all but wrapped up. But moving on to the Padres. In August, they get the Rockies. Then, like I said, they have 6 against the Pirates, which same thing I said about the Pirates. That is a huge 6 games for them as well. They get the Marlins and then Rockies again. Then Twins, Mets, Cardinals, Rays. So, very important August for the Padres. Diamondbacks, same thing. August, Pirates, Guardians, Phillies. That's a gauntlet of about a 10-game stretch right there. Then they'll get to cool off against the Rockies, Rays, and Marlins. But then they're back at it. Boston, the Mets, and Dodgers. So I think that Arizona might end up being a team that is the odd man out here, unfortunately. Because if you fall behind in August like this and you're already currently sitting outside of the wild card by only half a game, but that's a tough ask in August, and then to have to turn around and try to get hot again in September. We'll see. Like I said, only 6 teams could make it on each side. August is going to be a pretty fun month. Lots of baseball, lots of standings watching. This is really when, now obviously every game counts, but this is when every pitch starts to matter, and every decision that's made could either make or break your chances for a playoff berth. So buckle up. We got about 60 games left in the schedule, and it's going to be incredibly fun. And before we get out of here, I know some of you listen to Football Kingdom, our football recap podcast with myself and Tyler Mallon. I am excited to announce that we are returning to our weekly schedule starting August 7th. We're going to be previewing the AFC through the first 2 weeks of August, and then we're going to check out the NFC, and then we're going to be just ready to go for the regular season. Then we'll be back with our weekly episodes. So look for that. Again, that's Football Kingdom. Appreciate if you check that out. So thank you so much for listening this week. I will see you next time.